wonderful session. And thank you everybody for being here. It's lovely to be here today with all of you. So a little bit about me. I currently lead the marketing at a fintech startup called as Decentro. We are an API banking platform for financial integration. I've been there for the past 6 months, and I lead all organic efforts in the company when it comes to marketing. So I always did not have a writing or a marketing background. Like many of us out there, I was an engineer, graduated as an electronics engineer. Then I moved on to finding a job at an MNC as a software engineer. Joined there, realized that it was not my cup of tea, and then I resigned after a fortnight. I returned to my hometown and started looking for writing profiles. That is where things started changing for me. I got a role in a startup as a product marketer, and since then there has been no looking back for me. I was that is the whole place where I started. I evolved from writing into a marketer, and importantly, as an SEO. My then manager and mentor actually brought me into the world of SEO. In a very short span of time, I realized that I kind of had fallen in love with it. So I was lucky to have a good fundamental when it comes to SEO because she has an extensive experience about the same. And I think that is one of the important things when it comes to, being in this domain, knowing the basics and fundamentals. So, yeah, I even recall an instance where, I had to write a meta description about five to, yeah, let me just see the thing. I hope it's better now. I'm not quite sure, but I guess it is good for now. Are you facing any lag or a delay? Okay, I hope it's all right now. All right, sounds good. So yes, like I was saying, that is pretty much how my background as a writer, marketer, and SEO has been. Sure, sure. Right. So let's start off with one of the first topics that we have here, which is about SEO copywriting. Uh, so when essentially uh, when you're looking at it from a content marketing and an SEO point of view. Let's take the example of one of the most common things, one of the common factors of content marketing, which is your blog, or a web page for ease of understanding. So when you're a content writer or a content marketer, you uh, so essentially you can have uh, just a second. I guess I'm facing a little bit of connectivity issues. Just please hold on for a second. Am I audible? Hello? Audible, right? And I hope there are no issues with it. All right, all right. Yeah, so when you come, so I was talking about SEO copywriting. Yeah, sorry. So usually when it comes to, putting out a content marketing piece for the world to see, and especially when you're taking the case of a blog or a web page, there are two distinct, steps that are done for the same. One is the process of writing, and the other one is the process of optimizing it. And in more than often cases, you can find that two people are involved in this step. One person who's a content writer who could be writing the thing, and the other one can be the SEO analyst who takes it and optimizes the thing. So as you can understand, it is a dependent process. It takes time from one person to for the work to go to the next person, and there could be a little bit of time and a delay and all of it involved. So when you are an SEO copywriter, essentially you are doing both of these roles at the same time. You're writing as a content writer and you're optimizing it as an SEO person. So that is a very good job description and a skill to have on your and under your wing, because when you're looking at it from a company's perspective, instead of hiring two people to do the job, a single person, if they're able to handle it, that gives you an upper hand over a lot of other fellow contenders who are trying to look for the same opportunity, but who could be having just either of the skill. So a lot of, if when you look at majority of the job descriptions, marketing, writing, or be it any of it, there is always that clause that says basic understanding of SEO is a plus, or extensive SEO understanding is a requirement. So you can even say that content marketing and marketing in general is closely tied to SEO when it comes to that, because nowadays, more than spending a lot of money for ads, running ads, organic form of marketing is gaining a lot of traction. And one of the most important part of organic marketing, if not the most, would be SEO. So how do you move? How do you go about being a good SEO copywriter, right? So there are two angles at which you have to think when you are doing the job of SEO copywriting. One is the point of view of a user. When you are writing, you have to think in terms of the user's point of view. What are they expecting? What is the intent of them to come to your page or your website, visit your website? What are they trying to accomplish? So if you write a very dry content that doesn't reach anywhere, people are definitely bound to find no value from it and then simply leave. They don't think twice. On the other hand, when you are an SEO person, you have to think from the point of view of bots. By bots, what I mean is, Google bots or, Google crawlers. Since Google is one of the most popular search engines out there, we are just taking the example of it and then, moving ahead with the session. So when you are thinking from the point of view of bots, you are essentially thinking of all the factors to make it as easy for the bots to analyze and as friendly, because if there is neither, if there is no balance between the either of the two, it may not bring you the desired results that you're looking for. So essentially, these are the two things that you always have to keep in mind. When you're starting off, it may not be exactly easy. It could take some time, nothing to worry about it, because initially it could be like, you could be doing it as a step one, step two sort of thing. You'll be writing first, then you'll be optimizing next. But once with practice and, once down the lane, you can evolve and what about now? Yeah. Uh, so I hope I didn't you didn't miss any point that I was saying. Do you want me to take from a particular point? Got it, got it. So when you're starting off, you could be, like I said, it could be like a step one, step two sort of a thing. You will write first, then you optimize next for SEO. But down the lane, with a little bit of practice, you will understand that you can blend the two, and you can do it at the same time. And that is a very, very good upper hand that you can have, especially when you're in the domain of marketing and organic marketing in general. So you can save a lot of time. Your efforts will be on point, because very often what happens is when somebody writes and when another person optimizes it, in the process of adding relevant keywords, making slight tweaks, there is a possibility that a lot of a messaging dilution can happen in that angle. But when you're trying to do the same thing at the same time, it the the many facets of copywriting stands out. At the same time, your SEO angle also gets covered in a beautiful way. So it takes a little bit of time, but uh, once you evolve into it, there is no looking back since then. Um, Hachita, I guess we can move to the next one. Yes. So we've understood what is, copywriting and how important it is to blend in SEO into the content that you're writing when you're looking for, content marketing as a, engine for growth. So when you are a copywriter, one of the most as SEO copywriter, one of the most important that you thing that you have to keep in mind is to use and place your keywords. Keywords are the phrases that you're trying to, target, for which you want people to search for and then, land on your website as a result. So the placement of keywords has is one of the important things as an SEO copywriter in the first and foremost glance that you can see. Keep it natural. By natural, what I mean is that there should be no keyword stuffing. So as an SEO, one of the important things to keep in mind is get stuffing out of your dictionary. Don't even venture into that area, because that is one of the prominent black hat techniques out there. Black hat techniques are the shady methods that a person or a website uses to rank in Google search engine results page or the search. These black hat techniques will be penalized by Google sooner or later. You might rank, in a very short span of time, but it is totally not worth it because you can get penalized easily. And once your website gets penalized or banned, then consider it as an SEO Bermuda Triangle. Once you reach there, the scope of coming back is really hard, or it doesn't happen at all. So stay clear away from black hat techniques. Trust the process. It might take a little bit of time. SEO is not an overnight game. It will take a little bit of time. Trust your efforts and keep making changes. Keep iterating. Keep nurturing your all your content pieces, and you're bound to see the results. Really amazing results down the lane. So there was a time in SEO when the the whole point of keyword stuffing was done, in liberal. Everybody used to, stuff keywords and they used to rank. But down the lane, when Google started rolling out algorithmic, updates, for instance, there is Panda, there is Penguin, there is Rank Brain, there is Hummingbird. A lot of algorithms have been rolled out, which you can read about, readily available online. Each of these algorithms are aimed to tackle some or the other of the black hat techniques that I've mentioned before. So, for instance, when we look at the Penguin update, as you can see, it fights seriously against malpractices such as link schemes. Link scheme is, or unnatural links are the process of uh, uh, adding spammy links that makes no sense. It could be it could be a link that misleads the user. For instance, you might, when you visit a website, you might have seen those, play Rummy for free, and then when you land on it, you could get a virus on your on your computer. So all of those that are misguiding to both the user and the search engine, all of those has been completely, pushed out of that into the black territory by all of these updates. And Penguin update is one of the most milestone when it comes to removing keyword stuffing out of the equation, because the moment you unnaturally place keywords in your content, you keep on overusing it. The search engine is smart enough to figure out that this is what is happening in this page, and in no time you will start losing your rank. Stay clear away from it, and keep it natural. I'll be talking about, yeah, you have a question about Penguin update as the process, right? So as an app, we so when it comes to Google updates, we do not have a lot of in-depth information about the same. That is because if everybody knows how search engine works, then everybody will start ranking on the first page, right? So there are a couple of information that is released by Google out to the public to kind of, educate the site owners on what are the things to do and what are the things to not do. So as of now, Penguin update broadly covers all of the points that you can see over here when it comes to over optimizing in the form of keywords or links or bad links. All of those will be penalized, or will come under the black hat category. So since Penguin update has come out, a lot of improvement has come in terms of, how websites are seen, how SEO is done, how link building is done, how content is written, how it is optimized in terms of keywords and phrases. So it's not just Penguin. A lot of updates are there, out there that tackles one problem or the other at a time. So what you see right now, be it, when you can add a voice search on Google, or if you're typing something and the very instance where, Google tries to guess what you're saying and then, brings it in a drop down asking you, are you looking for this? All of that is a cumulative effort of, all of these algorithms that has been rolled out over the years. It's not a, overnight process. So when I mean keep something natural, so you will have this obvious question that I have a keyword in mind and I'm not supposed to overuse it. Then how can I optimize it? How can I make it, hygienic when it comes to SEO? Simple answer is that use variance of the keyword. By variance, what I mean is that it could it needn't be exactly it could be exactly the same. It could be a synonym of the keyword or the phrase, or it could even be like a cluster of keywords that are pertaining to the same thing. You could think of it like a web of words that mean the same thing. We'll come to more of that in the coming slides. Yeah, so this is just for your understanding. Over the years, the major updates. So every now and then, Google, rolls out minor updates, tweaks. Some of them are named, some of them are unnamed. But over the years, these are the broad, categories that you have. It could be a lot of things, for content syndication. It could be for bad links. It could be for, spammy backlinks. Fight against black hat techniques, like I said. So in a nutshell, these updates have, kind of cleaned up the mess that has, been brought on websites over the years. So moving on to more about copywriting. What are the things that you're supposed to keep in mind? So now you know that to strike a balance between good content and good SEO. So good content, yes, it answers the intent of the user. And when it comes to SEO, there are a couple of things that you can keep in mind when you're going about with the process. So I might not say that it is the three types of SEO that we have, but you could say that these are the three phases of SEO optimization. One is your on page, the other one is your off page, and then is your technical SEO. So we'll go through all of these in the form of a journey so that you can visualize it a little better. So when you get, again, let's take the example of a blog or a web page so that it's more easier for us to understand. So when you get a new topic in hand, when you're given a requirement as a writer, as a content marketer, and a SEO analyst, when you're given a topic, what are the first couple of things that you're supposed to do? Like how do you go about it? In a step by step organized manner. So when you get a topic in hand, you have to understand or you have to find out why you're writing it and for whom you're writing it. So that why and the who question is very important because when you're writing a content, you need to know whom you're writing it for. Assume that what you're writing for is for college students, but that college students are your what you're centering about, but your page is getting targeted to people who are say working professionals with 10 years of experience. There is an obvious mismatch. So as a working professional, when I come and I see content that is centered around students, it may not be relevant to me and I leave. So on the other hand, when you clearly know whom you're writing for, this this mismatch and this, unnecessary efforts and, the bouncing of visitors that happens gets completely eliminated. Next, you need to know why you're writing it. Why you're writing it, because when you are the type of content that you churn out has got different end goals. For instance, if you're writing a blog, that needn't be, to get customers first and foremost. That could be for, as a part of your brand building, purpose. When you're trying to establish yourself as a, as a one of the authoritative figures in an industry. So if you are an e-commerce platform, then you should be known as, say, a Mintra. It could be an online shopping platform. It could be, you could be, you should establish yourself, as one of the good names when it comes to an Amazon or a Mintra. So blog could be one form of, getting subscribers for your reading, and then for, keeping them, nurturing them, so that, sooner or later they could convert into customers. On the other hand, you could have web pages, you could have articles, you could have ebooks. All of these are directed towards getting leads. By leads, I'm sure what you know what leads mean. It's just getting the details of a possible customer, so that you get what they're looking for. Your sales team connects with them and then converts them into a paying customer, a revenue giving entity. So based on your goal, you're supposed to, make that call on, okay, whether should I use it for a lighter reading, or whether it should be really targeted to get me customers. So when you answer both of these questions, you can kind of get an idea about, what sort of content that you're churning out and for whom you're doing it and why you're doing it. Now you kind of have an idea about it. The next step for you is to kind of understand. Harshita, we'll move on to the next slide. So once you kind of get your content part sorted, the next one is where the game of SEO begins. One of the first steps that you have to do in this angle is to understand about keywords, or what you're targeting for. Keywords are simply words or phrases that will help people to find you, and then know about you, and then make a purchase from you. Because in most cases, making a purchase or some sort of an interaction is your end goal. So when you're looking, so researching these keywords, why is it important? Because if you don't do it, you will be simply throwing darts in the dark. You might be just assuming a lot of things, and then it might not, most of the time it will not give you any results at all. So keyword research will tell you what people are exactly searching for. For instance, if I'm looking for the best boutiques near me, or if I'm looking for the top let's say a quiz maker site, because I have a competition coming up and I want to make quizzes. So the keyword research process is what helps you to understand what the user is exactly, or a bunch of people are searching for. And when you target that particular keyword set or a particular keyword, all of these users down the line will potentially have a chance to see that there is somebody like you who is offering the same service or product. So it is to align yourself with what people actually want. And when you're so there are types of keywords to which we'll come about, but based on the stage that your company or a brand is at, you might have to think about choosing the keywords. So you know what your keywords could be. Now it's time for you to choose from it. So by choosing, what I mean is that assume that you just started out, and when you're starting out, you do not have a lot of authority because a lot of people do not know you. You're just building your brand in that, you're just building your presence. So in such a situation, if you are looking for really competitive keywords, assume that you are running an electronics store, and then you have a lot of products like coffee machines, or toasters, and ovens, electric ovens, a lot of those. So when you're just setting out, a lot of people may not know you, and your aim is to kind of get people to know more about you. In such a situation, if you're looking to rank for, say, coffee machines, so coffee machine is a very very broad term. A lot of people might be searching for it. but a lot of people might have different reasons for searching for it. So some might be about, to do a little bit of research to improve their own product. Another one could be directly a purchase. Another one could be a retailer business. So the intent of that search could, vary differently. So in such an angle, a lot of people will be competing for it, and it becomes very difficult for you to find a place and fight all this competition. On the other hand, all of those keywords that I'm talking about that are highly competitive, with high search volume, because obviously a lot of people are searching for it since it's a broad term. Those keywords are called as your fathead, like you can see at the in the graph. On the other hand, when you're so it doesn't mean that you have to start somewhere, right? So just because you are new and it's highly competitive, you have to make a start. So to help you make that start, there are a particular set of keywords called as the long tail keywords. Usually they have, comparatively lower search volume, because the number of people who might, type and find out exactly, very customized search is comparatively lesser. An example of that would be, best coffee machines in Bengaluru, or it could be best coffee machines in Bengaluru with price less than, say, 2000 rupees. So that means that the phrase is so focused and it is so broad that the possibility of the number of people searching in that exact manner or in a similar manner is comparatively lesser. So because the phrase is having such a high intent, the possibility of you ranking is higher because the competition is lesser. Plus, such a kind of a customer who lands on your website has got every intent of buying it. So if you're ranking for something broad, you have 10 people coming, maximum 2 people might make a purchase. But on the other hand, with a long tail keyword, if 5 people are visiting your website, out of that, at least 3 people will make a purchase. So this is that trade-off that you have between a fat head and a long tail keyword. Now moving on to chunky middle, they are, the in between of a long tail and a fathead keywords. They are relatively competitive, they have moderately good search volume, and their intent lies, somewhere focused but a little bit broader as well. So when you have moved on from that startup, or a starting stage, and you have sufficiently good authority to start ranking a lot of your pages, that is when you slowly, graduate into chunky middles and, fatheads. This is not a, one rule fits all sort of a case, but generally, uh, long tail keywords are seen as the low hanging fruit, or, one of the easiest ways to, get results. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this is how you're supposed to do, but these are some of the things that you can keep in mind so that you can choose what is most relevant for your business. um, I see a question there. Do they take the most time to decide if I compare with long tail? I am sorry, I didn't get that question. Can you just uh, talk about it a little bit in detail? Yeah. Yes. Yes. I'll wait for your question, Yathanshu. So yeah, no, I guess we have to. Uh, can you move to the previous slide, Hachita? Decision making of chunky middle ones. Yes. So once you start ranking for, a couple of your, long tail keywords, once a couple of your pages starts ranking, and your authority slowly starts, building through, say, social media presence or, email marketing. Essentially, when a lot more people start knowing about you, that could be a good time where, you can start targeting the chunky middle ones. Not that you cannot do it early on, but then you must not expect a result from it immediately. You can start targeting all of the keywords in these categories, but then you have to keep in mind that, you might not get results immediately. It's all about, the results timeline that you have in mind. I hope that answers. So again, you have three types of keywords once you decide from one of these categories: primary, secondary, tertiary. Primary keyword is the target that you have for your page: best coffee machines, or best coffee machines in Bangalore. So that will have the most number of occurrences in your page. By that, I don't mean keyword stuffing. It means that keyword will have a higher number of, you will find that more repeated in your content compared to the other keywords. Secondary keywords can also be known as auxiliary keywords. They are the variants or the synonyms of the keyword, where it might not be, it could be like, top coffee machine, or, it could be a latte machine. You could talk about a lot of variants. If you're talking about a coffee machine, it needn't be that you should restrict yourself to that. You can talk about a lot of things that are surrounding to coffee. You can talk about frappe, espresso, latte, cappuccino, a lot of things. So the search engine is smart enough to figure out, using these cluster of keywords, that your page is about coffee and essentially coffee machines. Now, moving on to tertiary keywords, it will have the least number of occurrence in your content, and it needn't be directly related to your primary keyword or secondary keyword in any way. It could even be a brand keyword. By brand keyword, what I mean is, uh, say your electronics store, that could be your brand keyword, just to kind of build that cloud around your content, that you are an electronic store member. That's the idea of it. Now, how can you find secondary keywords? In simple terms, keyword research tools will help you do that. In addition, SERP, or the search engine results page, is like the biggest gold mine of data when it comes to targeting keywords. You can, the people also search for section. Then when you click on something, you find the drop down that comes with Google, right? When you search for something, you are shown related searches as well. In simple terms, that drop down that you see when you search for something on Google is called as LSI, or latent semantic indexing. It gives you the related searches of a user, so that you can understand what people are looking for, and then appropriately add those into your content. So these are the variants and the synonyms that I was talking about, earlier, which will help you write content and include keywords naturally. Where can I insert a location between the three types of keyword? Tanushree, by location you mean? I'm yet to understand, like India or Sydney. So when it comes to location, there is a whole subcategory of SEO called as local search. You have to do a couple of activities when it comes to local search. For instance, Google My Business will be your first step to start about it. So irrespective of if you add a location, your searches can get a little bit more direct. So you will be able to get customers and results accordingly. But in the direct sense, it might not be, there is a different category called as local local search for location based optimization, I'd say. And SEO copywriting and SEO writing are the same thing. Yes, they are the same thing. You're a content marketer who has a who has a good hand with SEO also. It means the same thing. Yes, we can move on, Arshita. Yes, so I'm sure a lot of you might probably know about this, but yeah. So so now you have done the keyword research, you know the content, and now you move on to an important part of optimization called as meta optimization. So SEO metas, like you can see in the picture, is essentially what people see on the search results page, what is visible to them. So, based on all of these factors, the possibility of them clicking and landing your website is completely controlled by these factors. So, do you ask if they are directly related to ranking? Maybe, may not be. In most cases, more than ranking, it is all about making them click. So, what you see here to your URL. URL is essentially like the address for your web page. Like, I mean, you have addresses, right? The same way, the identity of your web page could be your URL. So some of the things to keep in mind is to keep it very crisp and short, to not make it very, elaborate, to not include, junk characters, because users will not trust it first and foremost. And, even your page could come under the wrong radar of search engines. So keep it very clear and, very crisp. Try to include the target keyword, if, in most cases, in a not so stuffed manner. Then your title and your description has got a character limit. Otherwise, what happens is, as you can see, are you able to find an ellipsis? So when you cross a certain character limit, your description gets truncated. So always try to limit your description and title in the characters that you can see on the presentation, and try to include the keyword and the variant. So don't stuff. You can use a primary keyword once, and then you can move on to a variant in your description. Don't stuff. And most importantly, keep in mind that these are for getting click-through rates from your users, or CTRs. So you can either write like a plain blank version of a meta description, or you can write a value driven ones which will get you clicks. A good example is, suppose you have a feature that will allow, easy exporting into a PDF, or into any other form for offline analysis. You can write meta description saying that easy export options is available. Does that drive value to a user? No. So how can you write a value driven or a good meta description? Instead, you can say perform in-depth analysis with, export options such as this. So here you're turning the table. Instead of putting the importance on the feature, you are putting the importance on what can be done with that feature. So when somebody sees this, they are bound to understand that, okay, I'm looking for this, and this tool can do this for me, so let me check it out. So this is not limited to meta descriptions alone. This goes across the content and writing, which we'll be seeing in the coming slides. Yes. So now, in the last stage, where we have optimized the metas and the content and all of it, your page now is ready. You have moved it on to design and development, and your page is live. It's now up for, it's up in production, and everybody can visit and see it. So what are the next steps that you're supposed to do in an effort to nurture the page, or in an effort to, start making the page rank in Google? So it's not like you create a page and you completely leave it and you move on to the next. You are supposed to, so just like you look after a plant, right? You're supposed to keep nurturing your pages every now and then. Why? Because when you make constant updates on your content and on your page, Google sees that as a positive sign and gives you points for it as well. They have not officially said it in any way, but then when over the years, these are some of the best practices that have helped multiple companies to, rank for really good, keywords, and then drive growth from SEO. So interlinking is one of the most important parts when it comes to on-page optimization, like we have seen in the previous slide. Interlinking is the process of, connecting your pages within your website. So it's just like, you have a page A, you have a page B, you have a page C. So you're connecting A to B, B to C, C to A to C. You are creating a web of links between them. So when this happens, it is a sign that, for Google to understand that, okay, ABC is related in some way. And then, ABC is, they could mean the same thing, and they are of use to a reader. And when that happens, it is easy for users to navigate, and it is also excellent for SEO. But unfortunately, not a lot of people are take interlinking very seriously. They are running behind backlinks, about which we'll be discussing soon. And interlinking is something that is not taken seriously, and that is something which should be done. It is a very underrated thing when it comes to, optimization. So when the anchor text is simply, the text over which you add the link. So suppose you have a, best copy makers in Bangalore, then, you can and in Bangalore, from so and so electronic store. Then if you're linking coffee maker to another page, then that coffee maker is your anchor text essentially. Nothing elaborate about it, but try not to over optimize it with keywords. Try to use variants again. When it comes to SEO, keep it natural, like I say every time. Yes, you can move on to. Sure, sure. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So where do you start? Maybe we can take it at the last so that we can answer it one by one because I didn't see Paramjeet's question. Sorry. Sure, sure, sure. Sounds good. Sounds good. We can do that. Yes. So whatever we saw till now are the on-page practices. So on-page means whatever you're doing, like literally on the page, that is within your website. All the optimization, the content, the SEO, the metas, the keywords, all of those are under your on-page efforts. Now, what are off-page and technical SEO? Off-page, like the name says, are all the practices that you do outside your website or off your page. So the primary thing or the most important thing over there is the process called as link building or backlinking. So assume that you have a friend and then you meet a stranger. There is no reason for you to talk to a stranger or be friends with them because you don't know who they are, right? On the other hand, assume that a friend of yours come and say that see, he is a stranger but he's a good friend of mine, she's a good friend of mine. Maybe if you talk to her you can be good friends too. You are more likely to trust that stranger because you know or trust or at least talk to that stranger because he or she is a friend of your friend. So backlinking in a way works the same manner. When a really trusted or an authoritative website drops a link or a links with your website in some way, it is a sign which Google takes that okay, this company trusts this website, so I guess this website is also trustworthy even though it is new. So assume that you get a backlink from say India Today or say Economic Times. They are all really authoritative sites. So when that happens, Google understands that if they trust this company enough or this brand enough to drop a backlink, I guess they are not spammy or they are not a fishy business. They are actually credible. So backlinking is a process of building your authority by getting links from really trusted sources. So one of the most common questions that that I get as an SEO is, does the number of links matter or does the quality of links matter? Hands down, the quality matters. If you get one good, really authoritative link, that serves much more purpose than 10 links with much lower authority or from random websites. So if you are looking to initiate a backlinking process, don't go behind the quantity of links that you get, go behind the quality. Always there are a lot of methods through which you can go about with your link building process, as you can see there. Guest posts, PR articles or press releases, where you share something good about your company, like a funding news. Then it could be, there are a lot of websites right now, like Medium or a Scoopit, which is essentially like a content curation or a content syndication platform. Syndication platforms are, they reuse the content that is published elsewhere, like for instance your blog, and then in the very end they will give a tagline saying that this was originally published somewhere else. So why that is important is because otherwise it will be a case of plagiarism. So content syndication sites will kind of, you can say, repurposes your content. So when you post a story of yours in Medium and you get a backlink out of it, you are essentially building up the authority of your, not just your page but for your website as well. And that is one of the important activities that you do for ranking in the search results page. So Moving on to, so you can see what happens, from website A to B. That external link and the backlink, the diagram is self-explanatory. So technical SEO, like the name says, it's a bunch of coding stuff that happens in the in the back end of the page, where you are essentially inducing a drop of programming or coding into your SEO efforts. So it's a very vast topic, and I might not be like the exactly the best person to talk about it because I am learning it myself. Uh, One thing about SEO is you have to keep learning every day because new updates come up every now and then. So if you are not clear about your fundamentals, if you're not up to date, you could lose out a lot of things. So in the very overview sense of technical SEO, it could be about structured data, it could be about schema, it could be about page load speed. By structured data, Harshita, can you move on? Can you move to the previous slide where we show about the meta title and the descriptions once more? Yeah. So are you able to see those in the very bottom line, meta description, meta tag variables, the snippet preview, page title for SEO? All of these are possible because of what is known as structured data or schema, where instead of randomly, keeping your content as such, you are, wrapping it up in a machine readable manner so that it can be readily presented to user in this manner. So rather than going inside the page and finding all of these headings, a user is more likely to, suppose I am looking for a page title for an SEO, that is my search intent, and I see that it is readily there. Compared to all other search results, I am more likely to click here because it is reducing my efforts, right? Oh, I see this, let me click it. That is one of the instincts that any user has. So structured data and schema markup is kind of helping out with this thing. And it can be applied across a lot of things like, your location, your company address, your content. There is a library itself for the same that is, released by Google, which you can, take up and see later. Hachita, we can come back. Yes. Now, another important part of technical SEO is what is called as robot.txt or robot text. So it is essentially telling Google whether or not to analyze your page or through the process known as crawling. Crawling is nothing but the bots come, they see your page, they understand what it is about, and decide on whether it has to be ranked or not. So when you are so for crawling to happen, there are a couple of tags known as the index and the follow tags, which will kind of control whether or not you're allowing the search engines to come and analyze your page. So if you block them, these will not your pages will not be shown on the search results page. So there are cases when you don't want them to crawl your page as well. For instance, if you have a page that is no longer of any use to you, assume that you have completely abandoned coffee maker as a product and you don't want anybody to come asking you about coffee makers. In such a case, it makes sense for you to no index and no follow that page so that it is not crawled anymore, it doesn't appear on search results anymore, and it is completely it's wiped off the radar. So not necessary you always have to do it. There are some special occasions where you might have to block the crawling, and this text will determine whether or not your page should be crawled or not. So this is just an overview, a lot to go in depth, but since we are dealing with SEO copywriting, that is why the emphasis was more on the on page part of things. Yes, Arshita. Now, cannibalization. So, this, I mean, SEO copywriting would be pretty incomplete if I don't talk about cannibalization. As the name says, it is the process of suppose you have page ABC. It is a process where your page A and B competes with itself rather than competing with the competitor or the outside world. So we do not want that to happen. So why does that happen? Why does one page of yours cannibalize your own another page? Why does that happen, and why is it bad? That is what we're going to talk about this. So cannibalization is a very serious issue that will happen, which can affect your growth and SEO. And this happens right in the keyword research stage. That is the reason why I said you have to be very careful when it comes to keyword researches, because it has got a domino effect down the lane. So cannibalization happens when you target very, very closely related keywords into different pages. So remember when I said that you're supposed to include a lot of variants in your page. So when you are mixing all of it into a single source, you have possibilities of not only ranking for your primary keywords but for your secondary keywords as well, and that gives a lot of visibility and lot of website traffic for just that page of yours. On the other hand, when you have multiple pages that are very, very closely related, the search engines are confused. Which page should I rank for this particular query, because they all look the same. So for instance, you can see your bicycle site. You write separate pages for best bicycle, top bicycle, r bicycle, and when somebody searches for bicycle, the search engines are not able to understand which page is it that they're supposed to show it to the user. And since they talk about the same keyword in more than often cases, the content will be very, very closely related. You cannot have multiple versions of your same content, right? There's a limit to churning out content in a different way. So when that happens, Google kind of thinks on its own, takes up one website or one page and shows it to the user. So essentially your other two pages are literally it's wasted, it's of no use. The problem with cannibalization happens when, assume that you're in the three pages, one has a insanely high search volume and the other one doesn't have any search volume. What happens is, when your the good search volume page, right, that gets completely ignored, and the poorly performing pages or terms get shown out. So when that happens, you're losing out on a lot of potential users that could land on your website. Next one is the issue of an intent. Suppose I am looking for to buy a bicycle, and while the other person is trying to learn about a bicycle, based on the different keywords that you're targeting, the intent of the user drastically changes. So you might have people visiting, but you will not have any end result that is happening. I have seen cannibalization, and it's a very, very tough thing, or a mess to clear up. And I'd always say stay clear away from it. It's not that it is not solvable, it is definitely solvable. And one of the easiest way to resolve it is that just look at the search volume, look at which are the pages that are already ranking. Based on a balance between the two, choose only one page, make that your pillar page. Abandon the other two pages. By abandon, what I mean is, you can point the address of those pages into your pillar page. That is done by a process called as 301 redirection. It's just like if you go to a shop and it is closed, then for renovation, then there is a placard that is written that this shop is closed now, but the new address of this is in some other location. So you go to the new location, right? So 301 does the same thing. So while it might take a little bit of time, it might not happen overnight, but then down the lane, your cannibalization issues will start slowly getting resolved. And most of the time, there might be a temporary dip or an issue that you face, but then it will be resolved with time. Yes, Ashita. Yeah, sure. Um, I do not see a. I've not seen also from my experience where cannibalization has been a good thing, because I've seen an instance where a blog has cannibalized a converting page or a web page, and then there has been a lot of loss in terms of the sign up, because blog tends to be more like a laid back form of reading. people are not actually willing to, make a purchase most commonly when it comes to a blog. So I have personally seen a case where uh, a blog has cannibalized a lot of, conversions and signups from a web page because pretty much same targeting was done. Big brands intentionally sometimes do cannibalization. I'm not quite aware of that. I've generally seen it as a practice which is, advised to be ignored. And a page Carpenter Delhi in a website, is it cannibalization? Uh, it could be. It could be a source of cannibalization. I guess. Because the only change that you can have is your, location and your content. Otherwise, to ensure that it doesn't happen, your content has to be drastically different. If you're able to do that, then you might be able to uh, stay clear of that, Tanushree. But it's a long shot, I'd say. Now, I just want you to look at this picture and just decide for yourself which one you're more inclined to choose. Is it the left picture or is it the right picture? Because essentially, yeah, Paramjit, I'll just get to your question. I'll just cover that in the session. Thank you. Yeah, so the picture essentially says the same thing. This person is going to Jacksonville. In one place, he has just normally said that this is the case, but for in the next one, he has induced a little bit of relatability to the user, a little bit of empathy, and he has made it a little bit emotional as well. So this is one of few of the things that you have to keep in mind, when you start writing, because there are obviously a lot of ways to present your content, but what is the content presentation that is going to you know give you a lot of reception in return? So this is all about value driven writing, which we'll be seeing in the next couple of slides. So I'd like to start off with this tweet or a quote that I read recently that says, marketing is just like sales, but it is done at a large scale. So essentially, you are also selling to a person that is coming. Unless a person likes what you have put out there in the form of, say a website, or, it could be your social media presence, it could be your newsletter, anything that falls under marketing. Unless a person likes what you're doing or are convinced with what you're doing, this is not going to happen. And in recent times, content marketing is one of the most important forms of organic marketing that is out there. Content marketing and SEO. So writing again plays a very important role in making this decision driving for a user. So how can you go about writing it? In a lot of cases, what we see is that people are more a little bit self-centered when it comes to writing, because that's a natural thing as well. When you say that so we are this company, I have this feature, I have that feature, I can do this, I can do that. So it is, you can see a lot of instances where a lot about the feature, a lot about the accomplishments, a lot of it is being spoken about. And in a way that is marketing too, because you are putting yourself out there, right? But when it comes to customers, for a real conversion to happen, for you to convince them, saying that we have XYZ feature is not going to help if the user doesn't know what they can do with it. So, all when it comes to value driven writing, rather than telling that I have this feature, you have to change it in a way to say that as a customer, you are able to do XYZ because of this particular feature that we have. Because to be very honest, people are becoming very, very brutal now. You, even if you have like the best of the best features, if that is of no value to a user, or if at least they are not able to identify how it's going to help them, they'll be like, okay, so you have this feature, so what should I do about it? And they're simply going to leave. On the other hand, when you change, it's just a matter of playing with words. When you change the whole thing, that is when the whole point of marketing starts to make sense. So like I said, You can go about it in a feature centric manner, you can go about in a customer centric manner. So in a lot of cases, going feature centric might make sense, especially if it's a hardcore product focused page, like that talks about we have this many features, we have this many features. Even in such a page, please do not forget to include that element of that value for a customer into it, because otherwise it's not going to make sense. For instance, if you're looking for a card, a loyalty program card, and you say that I have this card, and then you can use it for your customers, they'll be like, why should I use it for my customers? Because I'm paying you for it. How is it that benefiting me? Instead, you can say that with this card you can issue it to your customers. It can be part of your loyalty program. You can engage with your customers. They can use it for spending it across a lot of online and offline sources. So you start marketing what it can do, and that goes a long way in kind of convincing and making them sign up and then convert into a customer. So keep this in mind. It might not happen overnight, but with practice you will get into that mold of keeping a customer first, and then keeping everything else as a second priority. So I guess there is a question. Harshita, shall I? Yeah. So Paramjeet had a question of where to start writing as a newbie so that you start getting noticed. Yes. So by newbie, I'm assuming that you are a freelance writer, or you are somewhere in that zone, or you're aspiring for a content writing or a content marketing opportunity. I say this because it has worked out for me beautifully. Please have a blog of your own or a website of your own as your personal branding mechanism. So it needn't be an elaborate process. It can be a very, very simple blog, a very simple website. You can use WordPress for it, the free version, set it up as you want. Write and keep writing, because uh, when I mean, I have been personally told that one of the reasons how I got one of my roles, one of my jobs, is after they went through my personal website. Because that is when, in the direct words of the hiring manager, I was told that we saw that you have a personal website. That is when we realized that you are very, very serious about writing and marketing, and that really influenced our decision to consider you over a lot of others, and then move you into the subsequent rounds. So keep doing this. And to get noticed, LinkedIn, yes, absolutely, Jyoti, you can use Medium. WordPress is just an example that I said. Medium is totally fine. You can make use of any free tool out there, or you can invest also. That investment is totally worth it. That is totally your choice. And to get noticed, coming on to the second part of your question, have a very, very active presence in LinkedIn and Twitter. Twitter is comparatively slower, but LinkedIn has gives you results in a faster period of time. When I was freelancing, I did a freelancing for about 3 to 4 months. About 25 leads that I got, 24 of them was from LinkedIn. And I didn't do anything. I didn't go looking for opportunities. I didn't go asking for opportunities. All of it came through LinkedIn, only because I was active on LinkedIn. It needn't be a rocket science post that you put out there. It can be simple, thing that talks about what you love the most. So you can share a blog that you have written recently. So down the lane, people will start associating you with being a writer, being a SEO person, being a marketer, and that gets that is one of the easiest way for you to get noticed as well. Then there is a question, which is more profitable for a company, being product service centric or extremely customer centric? Um, that is a very, very high level question. Uh, so there is a way, essentially, if you look at it, it could be okay. It could be like, when you're having a product or a service approach, by that, what you could be meaning is that you are looking for a product led growth. By product led growth, it means that you're banking all of your bets on your product to convince customers to make the purchase. If you really look at it, customer centric approach and a product centric approach are intertwined in a lot of ways. When you keep customer first, when you keep your customers primarily in your mind, you are addressing a lot of their pain points. When you address a lot of their pain points, it is only natural for you to find solutions for the same. When you find solutions for the same, that will be incorporated in your product. When that happens, your product evolves and it starts, when an evolved product will eventually bring you more customers down the lane. So if you really look at me, I'd say that both of them are closely related. Customer centric approach is to understand what they're looking for and then using it to iterate your product to do better. So yes. Now about SEO freelancing, I took a sabbatical from my career and I did freelancing for about 4 to 5 months. And like I said previously, my personal blog, my personal website, and the fact that I was active on LinkedIn really helped with it. So if you're looking for SEO freelancing, you can go about it in a lot of ways. You can be an SEO copywriter, or you can be an SEO consultant, or you can simply be a content writer. It's totally up to you. I have been all the three. So that again depends on the kind of approach that you're having and the kind of clients that you get as well. So one of the things, if you're freelancing for the first time, one of the things that I really say is, please don't undersell yourself. Please don't think that I'm starting out new, so because of that I should charge less, or I should agree to whatever the client is saying. Please don't do that. It's not going to help. Always, it wouldn't be wrong to say that you have to cherry pick your clients. I understand that a lot of times that might not be possible, but when you get a string of bad clients, that will really affect your productivity, and you might not be able to, pursue the same with a lot of passion. It will kind of, reach the point of a burnout. So you can start looking for opportunities, but once you get a hang of it, please choose your clients. Look for people who respect what you do, who give you some space to kind of, wiggle room for you to, bring out your talent, and most importantly, who pays on time, and who, there is a give and take that happens. I have had really amazing clients, long standing clients, and I've had my share of bad experiences too. In that, what I have understood is that uh, it might be a little hard, but eventually you will land a couple of good clients with whom you can have a long standing relationship. In those cases, or if at all you're looking out for a new deal, negotiation is a very important part of it. uh, like I said, don't undersell because you're new. One of the things that has helped me to negotiate is that I'm very bad at it, by the way, full disclosure. So one of the things that has still helped me, even though I'm bad at negotiation, is that I have categorized my offerings into different sets, and I have quoted a price for all of it. For instance, if I'm writing only, it will be of one charge. If I'm writing and optimizing it for SEO, it is a different charge. If I'm helping them, with consultation, that will be a different charge, and that could be an hourly time-based thing. The other one could be a, per article or a per word based thing. Social media could be a totally different angle. So emails could be a different angle. So it is important for you to price all of it in a different manner, because you will need to tell them why you're charging what you're charging. So when they understand that, okay, these are, her prices, these are her offerings, there will be negotiations, but you will be able to come to a price that is, mutually agreeable. Because if you're working for a price that you're not happy with, that will definitely reflect on your productivity and the content that is there. I have even had cases where I've not even been paid. So you have to be prepared for all of those things. But again, it is something that you can learn with time. Fix a common channel for communication. It could be Google Meets, WhatsApp, Slack, anything. But that steady stream should always be there. And don't encourage people who take you for granted, and who makes you do a lot of uh, edits and re-edits, because you hear this a lot of times, right? They come to you and they're like, this is not right, that is not right, you have to keep doing it. To an extent, editing and making reworking certain sections makes sense, but if that becomes a routine, it is a red flag. You have to understand that it is not a healthy way of dealing with a client dealing with you. In that instance, it's always best to move out of it, and then go forward with new clients or work with existing ones unless you get a better opportunity. uh, Another thing that can save your time, it really saves my time, is by not writing the entire thing at one go and sending it to them. Once they give you a topic, ask for reference links so that you get an understanding of what they're looking for. It could be competitor links, or it could be any web page on the internet that will help you write it better. Once that happens, you write down headings of what you're planning to write, and you send it to them for review. So when they see it, they'll be like, okay, this heading makes sense, this doesn't look that way, you have to change this from X to Y. So after all those review, you will get a better understanding, and then only then you move on to writing the content. Otherwise, what happens is you will write these big paragraphs, you send it to them, they'll be like, this doesn't work, this is not relevant to us, and the 300 words that you write is completely gone to waste. Your time goes, a lot of your effort goes. Why do that? So save time mutually, keep them posted at every interval, and you tell them of, this is what your plan is. It saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of your effort, and a lot of back and forth is eliminated in that process. So these are some of the broad things that has helped me as a freelancer. Oh, again, payment is very important. uh, Raise invoices at a fixed time. Be sure to raise invoices in that exact time that you have decided. Start of the month, end of the month, your call. And a payment method, bank transfer. If you're dealing with overseas clients, it can be PayPal or a platform called as Veem. Veem is better because PayPal has a deduction that happens over every transaction while you lose money. Some clients may not be willing to compensate that money loss that happens. Veem is instant and it has worked better for me. Then I guess these are the broad freelancing things that has kind of helped me. And like you can see, some of these are some of the popular SEO tools that I use on a day-to-day basis. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. And if you're looking forward to investing heavily in SEO as a company, then I guess all of these are amazing tools to look by. I personally go ahead with Ahrefs because it has multiple things that happen at the same time. It's important for you to understand that not a single tool cannot do everything perfectly, especially when it comes to keyword research. At least refer three tools before you fix on your target keyword, and before you decide on the search volume, because there is a trend to see different search volumes in different tools. So amalgamate all of those and then make a call. So for instance, you can use Google keyword planner, which is absolutely free. Ahrefs is paid, Most is paid, but Google Trends is again free. Spyfo is yet another tool that is free. You have the paid version too, but then you can use the free one as well. So do it extensively, and then you should be off to a good start. Then for rank tracking, backlink analyzer. Most of the backlink analyzer, to get the full benefit out of it, you might have to go for the paid plans. And for analysis, your Google Analytics and Google Search Console will be really helpful to find out how many visitors have come to your website, how many time, the number of or the amount of time that they have spent, the bounce rates for your website. Then how many pages did they visit, like from A to B to C, how many such pages did they visit? Are they recurring visitors or are they first time visitors? Did they drop in their email ID, and did they convert? All of these details you can get through Google Analytics, and from Search Console you can understand your performance in the search, the number of impressions, the click through rates, then what are the keywords that you're targeting for, which is bringing you all of these visits in Google Analytics. So if you, in a sense, if you look at it, they are all interconnected. So play around with all of these keywords, take time to understand them. Online videos are available to understand Google Analytics and Console better, and you should be off to a good start there. I guess there is a question. I write LinkedIn about general things, what I've come across. I feel nothing like people writing great articles on SEO, content, or copywriting. Will it help? What should be the start? Okay. So the first question is you write about general things that you feel, nothing like people about SEO, content, or copywriting. Makes sense. So in such a case, I'm by general, I'm not quite sure, like by general, what you mean. If it is what you feel, please don't hesitate to post anything, putting yourself out there and being consistent that it is really, really, important and it works also. So please don't hesitate in that manner. Even when I started off, I didn't have great things to talk about. I mostly shared updates about my company where, I had a work anniversary, or, if it was a new campaign for my, company that I ran. These were some of the things that I started out. It is only down the lane that, I slowly started getting the more motivation and the courage. Courage would be the best word to start, posting about whatever little I know. Even as a newbie, if you're writing something that you have learned, it's absolutely fine. You start engaging with a lot of people in the field of interest. If you're interested in marketing, connect with a lot of people in the marketing domain. Follow their post and articles very closely. Interact, comment on those posts. Build a relationship between them. You can even share their post by saying that these are some beautiful insights that so and so person has given, and I find it really amazing. What are your opinions? There are a lot of ways for which you can engage on LinkedIn. It needn't be that you should always write something that is very authoritative. Nothing like that. That is something that you will find the confidence and the knowledge to do so sooner or later. Please don't worry about it. What should be the starting price that a newbie should ask for? Okay, this is a very subjective question. A lot of people charge differently. Depends on your client, what their budget is. I have worked for as low as 1.5 rupees, and I wouldn't say that is low because a lot of people work for much lower ones. Um, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it depends on if the client agrees to your style of writing as well. 1.5 to 2 might be a good start. Might be a good start. It depends. I think you applied when negotiation. Thank you so much, Mahima. Working for free, do you really vouch it? Absolutely not. Please don't do it. If you're good at something, please don't do it for free. Somebody really smart has said that. I don't recall who that is. If you're working for free, there are a lot of people who benefit from it, but there are also a lot of people who take that for granted. For instance, I have been told that the content that highly technical content that cannot be tweaked in a lot of ways because fundamentals don't change, right? I have been told that it is plagiarized and that guy got away without paying me. So please don't go for that, Yadhanshu. Even if it is a nominal fees, please charge it because your efforts are worth it, your time is worth it, and you're trying to learn also in the process. So even if it is a nominal fee, please charge it, work it out, and you will down the lane you will start seeing the change. How much should I charge if there is a project solely for editing and proofreading? I have not done that previously, so I might not be the best person to say it. I really don't know how editing and proofreading is charged. I've not done it before. I might not be the best person for it. What is the process of fixing a price for editing that we should bring into use? Um, I I'm not quite sure about it. Maybe that is something you will have to work with your client. So it depends, I guess. I won't be the best person for it, Mahima. How can Instagram help any content writer? Instagram is a platform that is, you could say that it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're running a company, then B2C companies, or companies that are consumer centric like a Swiggy or something along those lines, they tend to do really well on Instagram because a lot of people are there. A lot of their consumers are there on that platform. B2B platforms usually don't tend to do well, and as a content writer, if you are using it for personal purpose, then absolutely you can, use you can start a page for your own whatever musings that you have. You can post it out, and in due course it will start gaining followers. If you're approaching content writing in Instagram as a company, like I said, it depends on B2B and B2C. If you're a B2C, you can engage with them through a lot of means, like, you can run polls, you can have quiz competitions, you can have games, interact, basically it's all about engagement. So in Instagram, one of the first and foremost thing that you have to keep in mind is visually how you're able to engage with them the best. And once that happens, I guess you will be off to a good start. I've seen that the growth in Instagram could be a little slower than usual. So don't be very, very aggressive in terms of expecting results from it. I hope that answers your question, Jyoti. Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hope I've answered most of the questions. I guess I'm sorry if I missed out any. Sure, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm always available. Just drop me a direct message and just let me know that, you've come from the session so that I can understand it better. And then I'll be more than happy to, help you out in whatever way I can. Um, Sorry, I'm not able. Okay, it's not a question, right? You're asking me directly, no? So, can you let me know what you mean by a full-time job? Is it in the same field as marketing? Because then your full-time job is could be content writing as well. If it is not in the field of marketing, if you're belonging to some other domain and still you want to start content writing, absolutely, it is practical if you're able to set aside, say, at least 2 hours in a week. That's all that you need. Just write about anything that comes to your mind. You could, if it makes you, if it helps, if you feel more confident, you can. There are a lot of tutorials video that are available online that will help you to prune your content and your understanding of certain things better. So if you happen to have a person who, like a mentor, then you can directly approach them, ask them, understand where whenever you hit a roadblock. If that is not the case, then you can always look for these trusted tutorial videos. I'm not saying random ones. Go for really trusted ones. For instance, Ahref, Moz, Brian Dean, all of these people have really good articles that are there. They have videos for the same too. If you want, you can do that. If it is simply content writing, it could be personal one to start off with. You could freelance. There are a lot of options, and they are absolutely practical because I'm doing it. In your LinkedIn profile, it is written your Y Combinator. What is it? Y Combinator is one of the world's most reputed startup accelerator. They are a venture capitalist firm or a funding firm based out of Silicon Valley. So the company that I'm working for is backed by Y Combinator. Uh, I guess I've missed one question in the top from Nilesh. If I'm writing a blog for a client, then do I have to put internal and external links in the blog for SEO? Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's a very good question. So you might hesitate to put a lot of external links. By external link, what you mean is suppose you have an infographic that you have borrowed from somebody else. It is a good practice to always source the. I mean, add them as the source. Otherwise, you could land in problems in the case of copyright issues. So always credit the source. And in some cases you can add external links if it is really, if you feel that that particular link or that article is will really help the user. Because when you put external links, you are kind of being a very good entity or a good person in front of Google. Because external links are a sign which Google picks up as, okay, this person is allowing people to go out of their website. So they are, it's like a good karma, I'd say. It helps users too. So absolutely have a really good mix of internal and external links. It is good for your SEO, but keep in mind that you are not linking to spammy websites, because that can backfire. So always evaluate the external links that you're putting on your blog. Internal links anyway doesn't matter, it is always good. External links you evaluate, look for their spam score, look for the authority that they have, and then you put external links. But yes, it is a good practice to put there. um I hope, yes, I guess there is Yathanshu's question about no, I guess we have answered that. I guess that is it, Haritha, right? All the Yeah, so like I said, I hope you had a good informative session. I hope I was able to drive some value to it to all of you. Thank you so much for taking out the time and coming and attending this one. I hope I was able to do justice for it. In case you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll drop in my LinkedIn ID, and you can